Hey everyone, and welcome to Generative Now. I am Michael Magnano. I'm a partner at Lightspeed, and this week I'm speaking with Guillaume Verdon. You may know Gil as the founder of Extropic, a company creating physics-based AI processors. You may also know him as the person behind Beff Jezos on Twitter or X, and the founder of EAC, the movement that is advocating for rapid acceleration of artificial intelligence. We talked about a ton of things in this episode. I think you'll enjoy this conversation with Gil Verdon. Hey, Gil.
Hey, Michael. Pleasure to be here.
How you doing?
Doing good, doing good.
I've been very much looking forward to this. There's so much to get into. Obviously, want to talk about Extropic, want to talk about EAC. Would you be willing to take us back,
Sure.
Maybe even before Alphabet, some of your research, I think would be really, really interesting to start with.
Yeah, I mean, ever since I was a kid, I wanted to understand the physics of the world, because if you really understand the stack of the universe, then you can hack it better. You could produce more interesting technologies. So, that journey led me through theoretical physics, right? I was trying to understand, as one does growing up in theoretical physics, you're like, oh, I'm going to figure out the unifying theory of everything. I'm going to write a couple equations and they're going to be able to predict everything in the universe. And then everybody goes down that path, hits a wall, and then realizes that actually there's a lot of complexity in the universe, and there are things that you can represent complexity with complexity. And so I had a sort of a change of heart throughout my career in theoretical physics, that instead of having sort of human interpretable laws of physics, we're actually going to augment our intelligence with machines, right? And similar to how there's complexity and emergence in nature, we have complexity and emergence in our algorithms with deep learning and AI, right? And to me, that was one of the most profound things, that we can mimic nature's complexity with these artificial, complex, self-organizing systems. Most people are familiar with deep learning and neural networks, but there's a bunch of them that you could build. And so for me, as a theoretical physicist trying to have a way to understand the world at all scales, that led me to a path to go into and pioneer a field called quantum deep learning, which is basically how to extend notions of intelligence to understand the quantum mechanics of the world, which, a lot of the world around us is quantum mechanical at the very small scales. And day to day, it's not as relevant because it's we're at the large scales. But if you were
explain what you mean by that. A lot of the world is quantum mechanical.
So you have different laws of physics that are the best theory, the most practical theory at different scales, right? Like you don't need to do particle physics simulations like the LHC to predict, the temperature of your coffee in the morning, right? It's like a different scale of physics. And so you have different theories at different scales. It's called, renormalization or effective theories. And at the very small scales, things are actually quantum mechanical. Things are not even probabilistic. Things are in superpositions of different configurations. So you could think of them as sort of having parallel universes, and they could interfere with one another, and then you either collapse or condition on being a certain branch when a measurement happens. And so it's very funky, but a lot of generative AI is based on probability theory, statistics, and information theory. And there's actually generalizations of all these things to quantum information, right? And so I came from a school of thought that was trying to revolutionize theoretical physics through the lens of quantum information theory, right? So my mentor, Patrick Hayden, who's now a professor at Stanford, he was kind of the Claude Shannon of quantum information theory. And so that's what got me into this sort of school of thought. In a way, you could think of information theory being about entropy and compression and so on. And AI algorithms kind of operationalize information theory. They search over the space of transformations to figure out how to get compression code or get an error correcting code that is what information theory predicts is possible, right? And so extending the sort of philosophy of AI and deep learning algorithms to quantum mechanics, and having those algorithms run on quantum mechanical computers that were kind of emerging at the time in like 2014, 2015, right? That is what I was doing. So I was one of the first people to propose running a quantum neural network. I ran the first algorithms on Rigetti, for example, which was one of the first Silicon Valley plays in quantum computing. Very early on, I realized that quantum computers were going to take some time to scale. Right? It's kind of a similar to nuclear fusion. It's kind of a civilizational important node of the civilizational tech tree, but it's going to take some time to get there. And so, I decided to pay my dues and sort of connect the world of theoretical physics with quantum computing through quantum AI. I still believe in that being sort of end game to have the deepest answers about the universe. Is going to be a quantum mechanical form of AI that's combined with our modern systems. Are going to answer those questions. But as I was seeing sort of generative AI slowly take over the world or eat the world of software, I saw opportunities to use the sort of background we had in physics at the intersection of physics and AI to do different kinds of devices that are not quantum mechanical. And that's what led me to do Extropic after a career in quantum tech more broadly at Alphabet.
Got it. So just connecting the dots a little bit, you mentioned that early on you wanted to understand the world, and you said, in physics, you I think the words you use, like you hit a wall. Jumping ahead, like is the idea that basically quantum deep learning is the way that we will sort of break through that wall and be able to better understand things that we just can't with the tools that we have at our disposal?
Yeah, so it's a big question of how far can representations that work on classical or probabilistic computers like we're building, how far can they reach into understanding and compressing the world, right? Like let's say you had to figure out one compression code for the whole universe, right? What would that look like? And I studying sort of the limits of compression in nature. Actually, I used to study black holes and how they compress information because they're the densest objects in the universe. And what I was teasing out of it is that actually black holes, their representation or their compression code uses a mixture of a classical representation and a quantum representation. So that's how I, push the algorithms towards that area. TensorFlow Quantum was how to hybridize regular deep learning with quantum deep learning. And, I continued that sort of research at X. But yes, I would say that, let's say you're trying to understand materials.
The alphabet X.
Yeah, there's new X now. I got it.
Which also plays a role in your story.
Yeah, which is a big part of my life now somehow. Yeah. So to me, I think like if fundamentally you think of intelligence as compression, if you want to learn a compression code for all the data in the universe, it's going to be quantum mechanical in part. It's actually, nature has a lot of complexity, and you're going to tackle complexity with complexity. You tackle compute and nature with compute that is artificial. And actually really digging into that question of what is the complexity of nature and what is the difficulty of learning representations of complex systems. It's what gives me so much sort of first principles backing to saying things when I am in AI debates, like FOOM will never happen fundamentally, right? Like there's a sort of like inherent difficulty in grokking the physical world, right? As Stephen Wolfram would say, there's an irreducibility, right? You have to use similar amounts of compute to the compute used by nature to have an emergent behavior, right? It's really hard to predict at large scales what's going to happen for the microscopics, right? Just like, and this is true for many complex systems, whether it's your human body or the economy, right? Or, name it. There's quite a few complex systems out there. There's a conservation of difficulty. You won't have one God algorithm that compresses the whole world and can turn it into gray goo overnight, right? I think that's pretty provably impossible from what we know. It's just a weird kind of science, right? It's a weird kind of science because it's beyond like reason, right? It's like you can't even put into words why a certain material is going to be superconducting, right? It's a phase of matter. It's literally like a vibe shift. If you're like, well, this feels different, right? And that's why we started using AI to detect phase transitions in matter, because we don't necessarily have words for these kind of emergent behaviors at larger scales. And that's why, I'm super AI pilled, right? Like I think the future of physics, the future of being able to perceive, predict, and control our world is through AI. And I have been uniquely focused on physics-based AI. So physics inspired by the world to understand the world in part. Of course, you can use it to understand all sorts of other complex systems. But then the dual to that of embedding AI, the dual of embedding physics and AI is to embed AI into the physics of the world, into physics-based devices. And so that's what I spent my whole career doing, that sort of duality between the the physics of the world, the AI algorithms, and the physics of the devices that we use to run these algorithms.
You have a couple different threads to your career right now, and from what I can tell, your life. But like, what do you say, like what is your overarching like mission statement?
Yeah, I mean, it's really accretive to scaling intelligence throughout the universe, right? And with EAC, we're figuring out how to scale up Kardashev scale, which is the energy production and expenditure scale of civilization, right, on the log scale. So that's creating more watts per civilization, let's say. We have one civilization right now. And with Extropic, it's more intelligence per watt. And so if you scale both of that, you just have more intelligence in the universe. And yeah, to me, it's been, seeking answers to what does it all mean? Why are we here and where are we going? But I think there's starting to be sort of nuggets of answers here in this sort of principles of self-organization and viewing all of Earth as one big petri dish that's like a self-organizing system. It's a very useful abstraction. It's very sort of, people sometimes are taken aback by that. It's too physics sort of brained. It's not anthropocentric enough. But, at the end of the day, we're all embedded in the laws of physics. But at the same time, it's a very beautiful concept that the laws of physics have driven us to self-organized and help us create all the beautiful order and all the beautiful things we know day to day. And it's steering us towards even greater things, on average, right? And we're part of this process, and we're conscious that we're part of this process, which is a weird thing. So it's kind of a sort of, we're kind of leading a school of thought that will, originally I was trying to change theoretical physics with it, right? Like emergence and self-organization and AI for complex systems. I think we're bringing that sort of thinking to culture, politics to some extent, policy with EAC. And then on the computing side, it's like, hey, actually, you're no longer going to program the computer yourself. It's going to sort of do gradient descent by itself, get it self-organized, and you're just going to inject data and like tune how plastic it is, and that's about it. And then the rest you're giving up control to some extent, right? And so that's a different mindset and a sort of new school of thought that we're trying to, change science, change technology, architecture, and change our culture.
You mentioned early on that this is all going to take a long time, and it seems like even just in your lifespan, there's a through line. You've kind of been, seems like you've been kind of doing some form of this mission your whole life or for most of your life. And if something is going to take a really long time, it feels like there needs to be a very long-term movement around it. And I wonder, how much of, let's say, EAC was intentional, which is now sort of, I don't know if you want to call it a movement. I don't know what you refer to it. How much of that was intentional along those lines versus maybe somewhat accidental?
I mean, EAC is both sort of observation of these principles, right, that govern nature, but also govern our society. And it's a sort of awakening that actually, because of these principles, we can predict that, the whole system is biased towards growth. It is fundamental to its good. It's fundamental to its adaptivity. It's fundamental to its robustness. And if we value life, intelligence, and prosperity, the path to that is through growth. It is through constant adaptation. It is to constant sort of morphing, embracing variance in every aspect of our lives, whether it's culture, technologies, ways to organize ourselves, ways to live. In a sense, you could think of every aspect of civilization being sort of having a sort of evolutionary pressure upon it, because things, ways to organize ourselves that are advantageous towards growth get selected for because they're part of this bigger organism, right? Like, for example, corporate cultures is an example, right? If you have several companies that have different corporate cultures, one company will have a culture that confers it an advantage, and then they dominate in the market, and then other people will want to mimic that sort of corporate culture, and then it starts spreading, right? And so we've seen
A lot of that happened with Google.
Exactly, right? And now, who are the iconic cultures? Maybe it's going to be, I don't know, X or OpenAI, or we'll see.
Yeah.
But it's this observation, and in a sense, it's like that adaptivity, right? Maintaining that malleability, right? That flexibility, that constant disruption is how we remain anti-fragile to changing landscapes, right? If we have technology that's evolving very fast, one way to think about it is having a very stiff system and you have technology changing very fast, you're going to have a collapse, right? Or you're going to have your complex system failing massively, right? But which is, then it's like slow down progress, right? Because our slow systems can't adapt. The other way of thinking is actually if all our systems are malleable and we progressively integrate this disruption on a continuous time fashion, then actually the system is plastic and can adapt and we can avoid a collapse, right? And so for us, it was like, I think there's a whole spectrum of accelerationism movements. Some of them are like cheering for things to accelerate and for the system to be not able to adapt. We're the opposite. We're cheering for the system to adapt faster to keep up with the natural pace of things always changing. And this change is the fundamental thing. It is the fundamental driver behind life. It is the fundamental driver behind progress of our civilization. We should embrace it. We should celebrate it, and we should lean into it. But then really it's not a prescription of how exactly to live your life, right? It's more of a meta prescription of like, let's maintain freedoms. Let's maintain, always be experimenting, always be learning, always be iterating. Never, say this is the one way things are done at a global scale or whatnot. We want to maintain variance because you never know. You got to always be hedging your bets across everything because things change over time and you always got to be adapting.
How much of that was intentional? This movement, did you say, hey, we want, or did you and your founders of EX say, hey, we want to start this movement? Or was this more of just a way of thinking you all were doing, and then between that and the Twitter account, which we'll talk about, it took on a life of its own?
Originally, we're just having conversations about what does it all mean, right? And I think it was dark times, in 2021, everybody was locked down, the vibe was off, if you will, and we were trying to see, like, we were seeing, hey, there's this spread of sort of negativity, and people are so negative right now. And that tends to be very high fitness in terms of memes, like on the Twitter sphere and whatnot. And we were like, how do we fight this? Like, there's so much to be optimistic about. And optimism is actually important because if you're optimistic, you start thinking about better futures, and then your brain figures out how to close the gap between the world and your generative model of it, which is a whole theory of AI called active inference, which I'm a big fan of. That's going to be a whole different conversation, but that there's a sort of real science behind this concept of sort of what we call hyperstition, of sort of thinking positively, like helps you amplify the likelihood of those positive futures. And this is a heuristic we know very well in Silicon Valley, right? Like you need an optimistic founder that's ready to run through walls and doesn't take no for an answer and just keeps going no matter what. And to us, it was like, how do we scale that sort of mindset so that it has positive impact on the world, and we kind of have it as a cultural mimetic product that can spread? There's no real product, it's just an idea, right? And in a sense, like, again, we were thinking of like, what is the fastest timescale adaptation, right? You have adaptation of a technology, you have an adaptation of our bodies and genetics on a really long time scale, but the thing that moves really fast is memes, right? Which are like cultural packets of cultural software.
Yes.
Those can spread really fast on the internet, and they can do a lot of good very quickly. And so we felt like a sort of imperative to spread positivity, optimism, and sort of signal of like, where is this all going, right? Because people will stoke fear, people will tell you this and that is going to happen, give me more control, give me the keys to the kingdom, I'll keep you safe. We think that is a sort of dangerous vulnerability in many people, and we want to make people immunized against that by spreading, hey, it's going to be all right. The system's always adapting. This is how it's worked in the past. That's how it works in general. As long as we stay flexible, many people are working on this. We're going to adapt to whatever is to come. And so we're not saying this is exactly how the future is going to play out. It's like, statistically, this is how things work. This is actually a very powerful principle that has creating very advanced things, including our human bodies, right? And a lot of our tech tree, right? The markets are self-organizing, our bodies are self-organizing. You can have a sort of faith in it, faith in the laws of physics, if you will, right? That the system will adapt as long as we don't shoot ourselves in the foot. This also applies to policy, right? We want our policy making to be much more agile. And so we've been pushing towards sort of freedom and less regulation because there's obviously a lot of interest towards more regulation. Of course, the optimum is somewhere in the middle, right? But because politics is often bimodal, right? You have to make a solid case for one extreme to balance the other, right?
I meant to ask you that actually. Like, do you feel like it should be a balance, or are you all, or is EAC all for total complete freedom, zero regulation? I know there's this bill that this California senator recently proposed, which just seems like it would be really, really damaging to startups. I'm sure you know the one I'm talking about. Really, really, really good for big tech, right?
Yeah, and that's what we said was going to happen for 2 years, right? We were like, guys, they're going to use this AI safety talk to shove bills down our throats for your own good, but that are really for their own good, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's like, if there was a piece of regulation that was really clever, we'd be in support of it. But for now, I haven't seen such proposals. I would say that some regulation can make sense, but I just don't think any heavy-handed regulations, any very stiff priors over this is how things should be done. Your model should be in this parameter region and so on. It's very prescriptive. So you see, you're restricting our search over the space of this technology.
And things are changing so quickly.
Things are changing so quickly, right? And so if you don't know where things should be, you should have a very loose grip on things. And so you should have very sort of high-level policies.
What about the doomer fear?
They have a lot of fears. They have all sorts of scenarios.
Maybe like the most overarching around, natural selection and, AI is sort of out evolving human beings once there's a stable state of AGI.
There's a couple, aspects that people are worried about. There's one that is, this fable of Foom that like AI will be self-improving, and there will be an intelligence explosion overnight, and it will recursively self-improve. I fundamentally don't believe in that. I worked on AI for designing matter for many years now. It's much harder than people think, and there's a sort of complexity to nature that is inherent. It's inherent brakes on any sort of hacking that you could try to figure out, right? And in a sense, like the proof of this is that biology is a self-adaptive system running an algorithm very similar to our optimization algorithms. And it's been running this process for 2 billion years, trying to have a system that grows and acquires more energy and consumes it all. Right? Every biological system is trying to do that. It's incentivized to do that from the laws of thermodynamics, right? And yet, through this sort of adversarial equilibrium we've reached, and the fact that energy isn't just like infinite and easy to access at all times, there's actually a finite amount of life. We haven't consumed our whole planet yet, and maintaining this sort of adversarial equilibrium is what sort of keeps us in check. And so I don't believe in Foom on that end, for fundamental like reasons of complexity based on physics. And then when it comes to, let's say, maybe a more reasonable concern is like AI is going to take all our jobs, right? Or that's like a traditional, and
yeah, that's the nearer term fear.
I think that people aren't realizing we're becoming transhuman already. We have our phones basically glued to our, pockets every day, right? And it's an extension of our cognition, right? We have shared priors, we have information retrieval ways, right? Nowadays, you just have to remember a way to do a Google or Perplexity search to retrieve the information you need, right? You don't need to memorize things, and that's how our brains work. We're already sort of augmented. And I think as we have sort of AI more and more embedded in our lives, right? We have AI assistants that are going to see everything we see. They're going to they're going to shadow us. They're going to have a prior of what we've seen, what is the context of our lives, what we like to do given context, and then they'll have a predictive model of that, and you'll interact with it just like you interact with an assistant or a teammate that you've worked with for many years. You share a common prior, almost like one system. You have sort of group flow, and you're kind of an extension of one another's intelligence. That's already happening, and it's a sort of soft merge where we're extending our intelligence and providing massive intellectual leverage to ourselves. So that's for sort of white collar work. For blue collar work, we're going to have robotics, right? Embodied AI, and that's going to give us operational leverage. And frankly, I think we could use a lot of operational leverage because there's a ton of projects in the physical world that could massively speed up, right? We can't even build railways anymore. We don't have the labor and know-how, so we need to accelerate there, and that's going to provide massive prosperity and make our lives much better, right? Like when you think about it, scarcity has been the source of pain of modern times, right? Scarcity of, say, doctors and intellectual work and biotech and so on is why medicine and treatments are very expensive, right? Like it takes a lot of money to do drug discovery research. It takes a lot of money to train a doctor. That's going to get cheaper. It takes a lot of money to build housing. That's going to get cheaper with robotics. It takes a lot of money to build infrastructure. That's going to get cheaper. So a lot of things that are sources of pain in modern times are actually from sort of deceleration, inflation, overregulation. And so the other thesis is that actually letting the markets do their thing is actually the most moral thing to do because it's going to lead to more prosperity and better lives. And ultimately, I would say in terms of selection pressure, people like to talk about this, EAC and all this sort of thermodynamic talk we like to do is really a theory of how everything is actually being selected for, including products and technologies, right? If you think about it, there's currently a selective pressure on the space of LLMs, right? Because you have different LLMs, they have different hyperparameters, different ways of doing things, slightly different ways, and they're all offering competing APIs, right? And then people use this API or that API, and internally there's an adaptation loop of like, okay, we're going to use this model. Okay, it's not doing so well. We're going to use this model. So there's selective pressure there, and there's the broader market selecting which companies sort of thesis they want to back. And in a sense, like an LLM being run and live on GPUs, right, is consuming energy like a life form would, and it's alive. And if it's no longer online and available, then it's kind of dead. And so, we're seeing this sort of churn happening of the market, and we're actually creating a selective pressure on the space of AIs. And in general, people want AIs that are aligned to them, that will listen, that will do, what they ask, that are reliable, that aren't hiding things, right? Just like you would fire an employee that, lies or doesn't do what they said they would, right? After enough samples. So I think we're already aligning AI in a much more finessed way than trying to, through again an optimization algorithm, through our choices, and it's continual, and actually having competition and this continual release of AIs and sort of the selective pressure and this churn in the space of models is actually the way we align AI. And so
right, and we will ultimately not choose to adopt an AI that could cross over some safety threshold or misalignment threshold. I'm thinking back to the time that you talked about when you were doing the Twitter Spaces, the early days of EAC were starting to form online. Is this around the same time as the Twitter account that, I think a lot of people have become fans of and followers of, based Beff Jezos? Was this formed around that time?
Yeah, I mean, originally, I was an engineer in big tech, and I felt like I didn't feel comfortable voicing or even experimenting with different views on my account, right? Which is natural. I think like back then people were really scared of saying anything, and really I didn't realize how much I was restricting my own thoughts until I had an anonymous account that was low stakes, low follower counts, and I could just put my craziest ideas out there.
How did it get any audience though? Because it had 0 followers to start, right? I mean,
no, I started at 0, right? And I mean, that's the thing, in Twitter, there's a whole like subgraph of Twitter, right, called Anonymous Twitter. And there's some really potent intellectuals on there, a few sometimes undercover executives or VCs as well now. But really, it was just like a corner of the internet where you disentangle sort of your reputational staking that comes with tweeting with your main name. And so it's like there's downside protection, but also you don't capture as much of the upside either, right? And it's like, hey, I just want my ideas to be evaluated in the arena for their own worth, right? And of course, when I got doxed, things changed, and now, I'm all in.
But you still tweet. You still tweet from
I
there.
still tweet, because I mean, if I were to back down and walk back anything, then I didn't meet, it would efface everything I've worked on. I can stand by my ideas. I think, at the end of the day, I mean, I believe everything, I've said, I mean, sometimes I'm literally over the top just for giggles. Right. But, I mean, like the more serious posts, usually I'm just trying to experiment with my thoughts about the world, but I've just kept tweeting in the same style, and it seems to be working. So, I'm going to keep going as long as I can. Yeah.
What were some of the earliest ideas that really resonated and gave life to the Twitter account? Was it the EAC stuff? Was there other stuff? Was it just the memes in general that you were doing?
Yeah. I mean, I think EAC was pretty early. I think I started the account in like January, February, and then
Of what year? 2021?
Yeah. And then that was the original account. And then I said something that was a hypothesis, at the time, about certain labs and certain biotechnology, right? And I got banned for original Twitter, or I got kicked out, and then I had to redo the account. And so I went.
Beff got banned?
Yeah, the original Beff got banned, and then I restarted. So I had 6K followers, and then I restarted in August 2022, which is around the time I started my company, and then grew that account to now, I don't know, I guess 105K. But yeah, in the early days, I was just interacting with this sort of interesting sub community of Twitter, which was Twitter Anons, which now a lot of those people work at like big AI labs and so on, and are very influential. But really, it's kind of the platform where people evaluate ideas on their own, right? Like you said, removing the reputational staking kind of just allows you to convey pure ideas and for people to evaluate them without sort of just overthinking where it's come from.
Extropic.
Yeah.
So you said around this time you started Extropic. Obviously, I think it would be great for you to tell everyone what Extropic is and what you are building. But maybe first, is it a coincidence that it started around the same time, or was it intentional?
I think it's not intentional. I think there's a latent variable behind all this, is that I am thinking constantly about how to phrase all of AI as a sort of self-adaptive process embedded in physics. I'm swimming in out of equilibrium thermodynamic physics day in, day out. And so, I've kind of reshaped all my thinking through this lens. And that exercise has led to, me extending that sort of lens and sort of thinking to other sort of complex systems in our world and having observations, right? For me, it's like I've had to shift the way I see the world in order to do engineering of these devices that are really kind of alien, right? They don't look like a regular computer, and that sort of mindset shift has led to me wanting to explore how to put some ideas out there about civilization and all sorts of other systems. And now they're viral. But yeah, I think there's kind of like people thought that the docs was intentional or anything like that. I can assure you, anybody who was in my life and saw how chaotic things got around those days, I can assure you that was not the case. And we just scrambled to adapt to a weird situation. Basically, I didn't want to come out of stealth. I wanted to keep cooking. And basically, they had doxed the fact that I was running a company, because I was, I had a Twitter account in the quantum computing scene, and everybody in quantum computing was like, what is Guillaume doing? Because, I started the differentiable programming revolution in quantum computing, and that kind of ate the quantum computing world in terms of software. And they know I'm usually ahead of the curve there. And so they like to keep tabs on me. And I was being extremely secretive there. And so they were already doxing the fact that I was running Extropic. So it's like, well, if the media is going to dox me, I'm going to make it backfire on them, right? Like I'm going to lean into it and put up a website. Yeah. So we just scrambled, and I was in the time scale of a couple hours, called my designers, like, let's put up a website, let's put up some funnels and adapt. Right. And then over the weekend, very little sleep, wrote a blog post, on a lot of Red Bulls and just shipped it. And everybody thought it was like super well coordinated. It was like, no, we're doing it live, right? And so for us, it's gotten us a lot of attention, which is both good and bad, right? If you're a deep tech project, if you're used to being a secret part of a secret team in a secret lab, right, working on really deep stuff, having a lot of attention, it's not necessarily what you want, right? So, but for us, I think the main benefits has been having really great talent know about us and answer the phone and talk to us and consider joining the team, because I think the team we've built is really incredible. It's really a true modern Manhattan project for AI.
Yeah, tell us about Extropic. What is it? What are you building?
We're trying to build generative AI at the limits of physics. We're trying to push how tightly we can integrate the algorithms into the physics of electrons, now in silicon, at first in superconductors. And, for us, it's been like, how do you reinvent how you do computing from first principles to be as energy efficient and fast as possible? What are the actual physical limits to computing from first principles? And how do we engineer systems that are at that boundary? And that's what we're doing. And actually, if you study, machine learning, you have machine learning, which I mentioned is an operationalization of information theory. Information theory also appears in thermodynamics, right? Which is a theory of physics, right? So you could see the link between thermodynamics, information theory, and machine learning. And actually you can unify all three and create systems that instantiate this analogy between machine learning and thermodynamic physics, right? And if you do so, you have a very potent machine learning system, right? That does machine learning as a physical process, as a physical thermalization process. And so we're building what we call thermodynamic computers, which we're leading this sort of exodus away from quantum computing, which is using quantum mechanics, to a sort of form of computing that is using jiggles of electrons in nature, or rather, the stochastic physics, which is the technical term of electrons, to do machine learning as physics. And it's stochastic thermodynamics of electrons, so we call it thermodynamic computing. And so that's what we're building. And ultimately, we see that the market right now is hurtling towards this sort of soft wall of having to build nuclear reactor powered GPU superclusters, and we don't think that's sustainable, from an energy standpoint, but even from a return on investment standpoint. If you have to build $100 billion cluster to get $2 billion of revenue, might not everyone's going to want to pay that bill, right? And we're nearing that sort of edge of practicality.
So this is how you solve the efficiency problem, basically.
Yes.
Like this is how we scale AI.
Yes. And so for us, it's both like, how do we run today's, most sophisticated algorithms as a physical process, so solving that, but also how are we going to influence the space of algorithms, right? Because algorithms and hardware, they co-evolve, right? The algorithms that run well in today's hardware, they're more efficient, they give you more bang for your buck, they tend to have APIs and usage and more researchers, mutating the algorithm, right? And that's what we've seen with LLMs. But at the same time, let's say right now it's GPU manufacturers and TPUs are catering to those models. So there's a co-evolution of hardware and models, right, in the market, right? And we're trying to anticipate, okay, great, we can meet the market where it is now, but also how is the advent of our hardware, right, going to shift the landscape of algorithms and models, right? Which models are going to tend to have best performance and use our type of hardware best. And so we're trying to anticipate that. And ultimately, you can go back to first principles. So in statistical machine learning, really what you do is something called sampling or Monte Carlo sampling for all sorts of algorithms, whether it's inference and learning. And that you could think of it as roughly analogous to synthetic data, right? You're contrasting the synthetic data your model samples versus the actual data you were given, and that's how you do the learning of the system. The thing is, usually you want thousands, tens of thousands, millions of synthetic data samples. So that's way more compute than we're using right now with our simple forward pass-based computing, right? Well, you're seeing generative AI starting to go towards this route with, optimization at inference time, optimization-based forward passes. Our thesis is that we're going to go deep into the higher compute regime sort of lower data, maybe even lower parameter counts, right? Because if you have so much compute, you can still get really good performance with less parameter counts. And we want to enable that. But how do we get far more compute from nature, right? For far less, right? And so that's what we're hacking. And to us, it's if you can embed the algorithm directly into the almost natural dance of electrons and slightly bias them as they move around your circuit, you're very gently guiding these electrons. It's very energy efficient, and you're using the natural physics of electrons as sort of a resource to generate that synthetic data. So it really has the first principles behind it to be more data efficient, more energy efficient, and much faster. And so it's both a hardware and algorithmic sort of revolution. Of course, we can, like I said, we're working hard on anchoring to current day algorithms, right? We want to take one risk at a time and just showcase that hardware works. But as we put our hardware on market, which is going to be on a faster timescale than some people think, then we hope that it's going to influence where the space of algorithms for AI goes, because we don't have a choice but to change something fundamentally, because we're hitting the soft ceiling of energy expenditure, and we might run out of data as well, right? So we're going to have to use more compute anyways.
So current dynamic is such that we're building algorithms, we're building models that all can only exist within the limitations of our current GPUs, our current computers. And as a result, we're going to need to draw down far more energy than may even be possible.
I think the thing that's, interesting, it's not just it's going to be current day LLMs scaled up. It's going to be new sorts of algorithms that are maybe not that tractable right now, or only used in certain niches like finance, for example. They're going to be spread to the rest of the world. Imagine you had a Wall Street decision making for your day-to-day decisions, right? You could quantify the uncertainty about your predictions and so on about everything. That's much more computationally expensive to do these simulations, right? Like traders do them overnight for massive trades, right? Build up conviction about a trade and quantify the uncertainty of their models. But if you have that sort of quality of decision making throughout every organization, then that unlocks way more penetration for AI in the broader economy. Because right now, the reason LMs haven't penetrated everywhere is that people don't quite trust that the LM quantifies how uncertain it is about its predictions. It's not giving you a sort of interpretable model of its thinking. And that could fundamentally change with sort of a more probabilistic approach to ML. But the reason we think there hasn't been uptake, apart from Wall Street, where they could just throw a ton of compute behind every decision because it's so high stakes, or maybe defense, the reason it hasn't penetrated the broader market is that the compute for this type of algorithm just isn't there. Whereas this sort of disruption we're creating with this new form of thermodynamic compute that runs these types of algorithms, Monte Carlo algorithms, if it fits perfectly on the hardware, up to a million times faster because you're using fluctuations of electrons natively. I think that's going to disrupt the space of algorithms and hopefully allow AI to become a part of everyone's lives for many or most decisions we make. And so it's kind of really early in a sense of the uptake of AI in the broader economy. But we've seen now the potential with LLMs, and we're going to keep going. And it's going to be both the applications, the models, and the hardware progress. The sort of flywheel keeping it going is the priority to avoid any sort of winter and to keep deploying this technology, because it's the thesis that this technology and deploying it at scale is what's going to allow us to be massively prosperous and live better lives. And that's our thesis, and we believe that. And Moore's law is what has propelled a lot of the wealth we see today, and the boom in Silicon Valley, and making sure we can keep that going, right? Are we going to be able to scale lithographic processes to keep getting smaller? Well, right now we can't, because if you do so, your transistor becomes probabilistic. It misfires. Right. But if you're actually using that as a feature rather than a bug, then you can keep going and keep making things smaller. So it's actually the only way to keep Moore's law going. And so,
right.
It's kind of like this multi-dimensional checkmate of like, okay, I am convinced. I have, personally, it took 8 years now that I've been thinking about this to figure out where the future of AI is going, from algorithms, physics, supply chains, everything. And this is where it's going. And, we're a company placing a bet here on how to build it. We are going to open source a bunch of the concepts of how to do thermodynamic computing on, say, superconducting platforms, which have less mature supply chains, let's just say that, than silicon. So people should stay tuned for that. But our hope is that it inspires people to think bigger and think differently about the future of computing. I think a lot of people are like, all right, we have TSMC, we have NVIDIA. That's a pillar that's never going to move, right? And then everything else above that layer is fair game, right?
Yeah.
Well, we want people to start thinking full stack, and I think some of the big players are starting to think about that, but they're early in their thinking.
What can you tell us about where you currently are with your progress, and how soon will we see something in market?
So our superconducting stuff is more of an R&D and kind of getting a research community excited about this, because obviously if it's going to be as big as quantum computing, we need the academic community, national lab community to get interested in this. So that we're going to put stuff out in the coming months. And then I would say next year, we're going to have our first silicon chips back running at room temperature. And so that is a big deal. And so we're rushing for that. And at that point, we're actually ready to take on partners and do early commercialization, right? The thing is, we're going to start with, like I said, small models, small data applications that need a lot of speed and energy efficiency.
What are types of applications? Like what give us some examples of what that would be.
Probabilistic inference, control systems, statistical inference that has to be ultra fast, whether you're high frequency trading, whether you're doing control system that has to be ultra responsive, whether it's, defense applications, robotics, and that's the sort of areas of interest in the early days. And, it looks like at first we do some application specific circuits with partners, but over time, as we know which circuits are useful to many people, then we can make sort of chips that have many of these building blocks, and then they're kind of more programmable for a mixture of applications. Of course, at scale, it's going to look something like a foundation model. Foundation models kind of, depending on context, pick which circuitry they activate, right? If you really look into a transformer, that's what it does. At scale, that's what our chips are going to do, because they're going to be big enough to contain all these different circuits, right? And so, but in the early days, it's going to be very specialized small models, but everything we're going to learn there is going to help us get to, the massive chips that are, brain scale, right? And so that's going to be really exciting.
Awesome. Well, Gil, this has been fascinating. I certainly learned a ton. I'm sure the audience has as well. Thank you so much for doing this. Would love to do this again sometime.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Michael. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to Generative Now. If you liked what you heard, please rate and review the podcast. That does help. And of course, subscribe so you get notified every time we drop a new episode. Generative Now is produced by Lightspeed in partnership with Pod People. I am Michael McDonough, and we will be back next week. See you then. Thanks.